By now you've seen the thumbnail. You know I'm gonna have a really controversial take. I didn't like this book and I'm so upset about it. I tried so hard to like this, and it wasn't necessarily about the writing, which was, I think, objectively not that great. But I won't judge because it was written in like 1960 something. So we're not here to judge necessarily the writing style of this book, but I think that what's keeping the reviews very high on this is nostalgia and people's love of the movie. And I was hoping to watch the movie before I did this review so that I could say objectively, I do think it is that, because I had watched the movie, because it's been like 30 years since I've watched the movie, okay? I'm old. I watched it when I was like yay fucking high. Not much shorter than I am now, to be fair. But this is not that great. And I think a lot of it is due to the time that it was written, unfortunately. So let's talk about it. But first, it's nearing the end of my favorite cider season, which is the cider season. So I'm gonna have a cider and we're gonna talk about this because I'm having a day. So apparently this can is supposed to go in the dark, but we tested it and it does not. So if you like spiced ciders or spiced flavors, like, it's good cider, it's not super sweet, I'm gonna have one and then I'm gonna have a sip and then we're gonna start, because you're probably gonna hear Hugo in the background too. It is what it is these days. I think his age is showing, he's demanding, it is what it is. So let's talk about The Last Unicorn by Peter S Beagle. This is actually not the first thing I have read from Mr. Beagle. I did read a short story. He had a short story in Songs of Love and Death, which was edited by George R. R. Martin. I got this as a blind book and I actually really enjoyed it because it gave me a lot of introduction to fantasy authors that I've never read, and so I read this at the end of 2023. There's a couple stories I didn't read because I didn't want to spoil a book, so now I can go back and read them. The Peter Beagle one was actually really good, and I was looking forward to reading it, to reading his actual book. It's called Caskia, so page 389. Let's take a look at that one real quick, just so I can remember what it was about, because I really liked it. This was the computer one. So it starts off with like a little bit about, like, each chapter, each short story has like an introduction. And it says Peter Beagle was born in New York City in 1939. Although not prolific by genre standards, he has published a number of well-received fantasy novels, at least two of which, A Fine and Private Place and The Last Unicorn, were widely influential and are now considered to be classics of the genre. And I do say this was a classic. Like, it read like a classic. I can definitely say how it informed so much fantasy. I will give it that 100%. I'm not here to take it down on its standing in the genre as a whole, or the style, or anything like that. I just personally did not enjoy the reading experience. And I liked the writing in this a lot, and I can see so much growth as a writer between these two things. I believe this was published in... When was this published? This was published in 2010. So a lot of time between these two things. And I can definitely see how he grew, because there's some metaphors in here that are not pleasant to read. So if you are unfamiliar, because I was largely unfamiliar, we'll say I was like 7 or 8 when I watched that movie. I really don't remember. I just remember that the babysitter that I watched it with, because she was only like 13, because this was the 90s, and so she was my babysitter from the time she was 11. So she was not very good at making pizza, and she ended up burning pizza, and so we always had burnt tombstone, because then we just all decided we liked it better that way, because kids are weird. So we always had burnt tombstone and Mountain Dew, and we had burnt tombstone and Mountain Dew, and we rented The Last Unicorn from Blockbuster. Like I said, I'm old. So I have that memory, and I remember the art of it, and that's basically all I remember. And then I remember making up stories similar to the one from the movie. So anyway, if you are unfamiliar, The Last Unicorn follows the last unicorn. She discovers that she's the last unicorn by overhearing a couple of hunters in her forest, and she decides she's going to go leave her forest and search out the members of her own kind, because she cannot believe what these two humans are saying and that her people are gone. And so as she's going, she realizes humans aren't seeing her as a unicorn, they're seeing her as a beautiful white mare, which I was very amused by, like, the first interaction, because it is definitely written in a way that is not how things would be said today. But he refers to her as essentially an Arabian horse, and he's like, oh, that's an Arab, is how he says it. And it kind of informed why, basically, when I was a kid and I would be at Arabian horse shows, people would joke about, oh yeah, that's an Arab. It's probably came from this book. So although definitely underlining of racism there. But he talks about how that's what he sees her as, because he sees her as this very elegant horse, and she's definitively not a horse. It talks about her split hooves and her tail being like it's drawn here, and her strange eyes and things like that. So he sees her as that. And from then on, but he still tries to catch her. And the only thing that recognizes her in that moment is a butterfly. And the butterfly tells her about the red bull that is like rounding up her kind. But he speaks in all of these like rhymes and rhythms, and I was getting very much Lewis Carroll vibes from it. And I was so like put off by that little sentence structure that I was like, what is happening? Which was fine. I was like, it's fine. I'm just had to read it a couple times to be like, what are we doing? So she decides then that she's going to go hunt down this red bull, and she ends up getting kidnapped by a witch kind of who runs this circus, and basically she has all these magical creatures on display, but the only creature she has on display that's real is this harpy, and then all the other creatures are like hit with a glamour. So she glamours the unicorn so that people can see her as a real unicorn, which is interesting. And that's when she meets Schmendrick, he's described at some point as a poor man's Merlin whose devotion to the exquisite creature he follows is exceeded only by his mediocrity in magic. He's essentially not good at doing magic. He tries to use his magic to free her, and he fails, but he ends up kind of being able to free her. It's like this whole thing. He frees her eventually through happenstance, and at the same time the harpy breaks free, and there's a very small conflict between her and the harpy that is essentially never really comes to fruition again. And I was hoping that the harpy would like be a whole thing. It was not a thing. Not a thing. So then we basically have her and Schmendrick on this journey towards King Haggard's castle to try to find out where her people went, because King Haggard is apparently in charge of the bull, or maybe not. They pick up all these different rumors about what his relation to the bull is, but all we know is that him and the bull have a special relationship. And for some reason, the unicorns are disappearing. On the way there, we come across this group of bandits, and the bandits kind of try to kidnap Schmendrick after some silly little things, and he tricks them by randomly being able to actually call on magic, and calls forth Robin Hood and all of his merry men, which then all of the bandits groups go off following, and Schmendrick uses that to try to escape and gets saved by Molly Grew, who becomes our third to this party. She's just kind of there. Really. She's there because she also sees the unicorn as a unicorn and falls completely in love with the fact that she's a unicorn. She becomes the little girl who's obsessed with the idea of fairy tales, basically, and this unicorn means that to her. So the three of them are now headed out to try to get to this bull. And eventually we do, but the bull pins down the unicorn, and to save her, Schmendrick once again calls on his magic, and he turns her human. And this is where I started to have a lot of problems with it, because I was just bored up until this point, but this is where I started to have problems with it. So he turns her human, and I'll come back to this because I just want to tell you the plot. So he turns her human. The bull doesn't understand what's happening, doesn't recognize her as a unicorn. The sun is coming up. The bull can't be active when the sun is up. He disappears back under the castle, and the three of them eventually decide they're going to infiltrate the castle so that they can try to determine what happened to the unicorns and defeat the bull and King Haggard. And eventually they do. So I'm going to go into that on more detail, because that was the part that was mainly the stuff that bothered me. Up until that point, we don't really get a whole lot of why the unicorn wants to find her people, except for the fact that she doesn't want to be the last of her kind. And we have some kind of like hints at like if the unicorns leave the world, it'll be far less of magic and we'll lose all these things, but we don't really know what exactly is going to happen if the unicorns die out. We know that the unicorns already are like immortal unless they are killed. So they have extended lives unless they are killed. And they can be killed. They don't reproduce often. So essentially what is in the world is what is in the world for the unicorns. But we don't have a lot of stakes. And the unicorn, once we bring in Schmendrick and Molly, we kind of ignore her. And especially with Schmendrick coming in too, we ignore her a lot, and because we're dealing with how he interacts with people and how he kind of uses his unassumedness of his appearance to get his way into different things and to be able to get them lodgings and things like that throughout this trek. What could have been a very interesting backpack fantasy with a lot of world building ends up being a lot of badly written jokes about Schmendrick being a poor magician and people's greed, essentially. but I think it feels very much like a rough draft on those things. So I want to talk in order about the first few things that bothered me. Was this story that Schmendrick tells the unicorn. So he's trying to convince her to let him go with her on her quest to find the bull. And he says, I might be useful. I know the way to Haggard's country and the languages of the lands between here and there. The unicorn seemed very near to vanishing into the sticky mist, and Schmendrick hurried on. Why is the mist sticky? It's a weird description of mist. I guess you could... It's not sticky. It's damp. Besides, no wanderer was ever worse for a wizard's company, even a unicorn. Remember the tale of the great wizard Nikos. Once in the woods, he beheld a unicorn sleeping with his head in the lap of a giggling virgin. While 3 hunters advanced with drawn bows to slay him for his horn, Nikos only had a moment to act. With a word and a wave, he changed the unicorn into a handsome young man, who woke and, seeing the astonished bowmen gaping there, charged upon them and killed them all. His sword was of a twisted tapering design, and he trampled the bodies when the men were dead. And the girl, the unicorn asked, did he kill the girl too? No, he married her. He said she was only an aimless child, angry at her family, and that all she needed was a good man, which he was, then and always, for even Nikos could never give him back his first form. He died old and respected of a surfeit of violets, some say. He never could get enough violets. There were no children. The story lodged itself somewhere in the unicorn's breath. The magician did him no service, but great ill, she said softly. How terrible it would be if all my people had been turned human by well-meaning wizards. Exiled, trapped in burning houses, I would sooner find that the Red Bull had killed them all. So, I had issues with this little story. I had two things that are important to this little story. It is a thing of its time, right? The giggling virgin, and she needed a strong man to guide her, and as soon as he turned human, he married her because he was there, basically. I was like, if this is setting the tone for it definitely tells you about Schmendrick's character and him being like, yes, this is acceptable in the world that we are in. This is how things are handled. The unicorn, there we go. Her opposition to this was that the unicorn couldn't be changed back again. And that is important to her. She doesn't really care about people, so she doesn't care that this girl was not necessarily given the best outcome in this story. She cares that the unicorn was trapped then in a mortal form and had to spend his life mortal and couldn't go back to his true form. He was trapped in a burning house. The metaphor there actually being pretty good, I think, being that a body that can die is a burning house that you're trapped in. This is foreshadowing for what's going to happen in the future as well. And it turns out later, too, that Nikos is Schmendrick's mentor. My words today. I'm having a rough day. I apologize. I didn't need to get this talked about. So that, like I said, that sets kind of the tone for the story that we're going to have happen. And there was a couple other things. So as we're traveling, I did like this comment about men have to have heroes, but no man can ever be as big as the need, and so a legend grows around a grain of truth like a pearl. And he's talking about like John Henry and Robin Hood and all of these like classic heroes. And I did like that like little kind of metaphor. There's a few good lines in here, but there's also some really bad ones. And this is where we're with the band of outlaws. One of them called Jingly Jack Jingly. The tone of this goes back and forth between trying to be funny, and it's almost trying too hard in some places, to being very serious and making observations about things that are very serious. And I struggled with the switching of the tone often in the same paragraph. About page 125 out of 250-ish, so about halfway through, is when the unicorn gets turned human. And that's when they give her the name Lady Amalthea. She never had the name Amalthea. She didn't have a name. She was the unicorn. The unicorns don't have names, so far as I can tell from this book. She had to be given a name while she was in human form for her to be referred to as throughout the rest of the story. So if you're ever referring to the unicorn in her unicorn form as Lady Amalthea, just know that's not the name she chose for herself. It's a name that was given to her in a form that she despised. She gets turned into a girl, very, very clearly a girl. And there's this whole argument between Schmendrick and Molly, because Molly's pissed that he's done this to her, that he's turned her human. And she calls him an idiot. You're a magician, but you're a stupid magician. And then it says, but the girl was trying to wake. She's very clearly described as a young girl who is also completely without clothes in this And so maybe it's everything going on in the United States right now with the files and everything, but this put me off quite a bit. So Molly tries to cover her, but she keeps shrugging it off because she's a unicorn. She doesn't wear clothes. She keeps shrugging off the cloak. She like is very upset about this whole situation, and she gets really upset and asks, what have you done to me? And Schmendrick says, I turned you into a human being to save you from the Red Bull. There was nothing else I could do. I will turn you to yourself again as soon as I can. And then they kind of talk about the Red Bull for a little bit, and then she goes back into, but what have you done to me? Because she's still very disoriented, and then she's like, I will die here, and goes off about, like, basically she's like so upset about this stripping of her identity, and he's brushing it off like it's nothing, but we're not really dealing with that. We're trying to like lean into like Schmendrick being right in this situation. There's really like Molly is kind of viewed as acting a little ridiculous, and the unicorn is viewed as acting a little ridiculous because we're very much leaning into Schmendrick being right, that this was the only thing he could do. And she says, why did you not let the bull kill me? Why did you not leave me to the harpy? That would have been kinder than closing me in this cage. And she talks about how she can feel the body rotting around her. She's used to being more immortal, and now she can feel this body dying around her, and she's going to be trapped. And he responds with, in the first place, it's quite an attractive shape. You couldn't have done much better and still remained human. And that really, really bothered me, because shortly after this too, we get told that Schmendrick is also essentially immortal at the time. He's like incredibly old because he's also trapped, but he's trapped in immortality. His mentor decided he was such a bad magician that he would trap him in a body that can't age or die until he gets his shit together. And then once he learns to control his magic and actually channel it and use it, then he can get his mortality back. So his whole reason for helping out the unicorn is not because he's enamored with her, it's because he wants to get his power under control so that he can be mortal. He wants to use her journey to his benefit. And we find that out as the story goes, and now he's like talking about this unicorn and how attractive she is in human form when it's clearly described that she is a young girl. And that really put me off. And there's like a whole scene of like the unicorn like looking herself over after this, after he says that she's attractive, which was weird too. And he does concede. He says, it would make no difference to you if I had changed you into a rhinoceros, which is where the whole silly myth got started. But in this guise, you have some chance of reaching King Haggard and finding out what has become of your people. As a unicorn, you would only suffer their fate unless you think you could defeat the bull if you met him a second time. And then they start talking about how rhinos don't really care what they look like, which I was like, why does this matter? Like, why again are we going really like leaning into the like silliness of it? So after she becomes human, they go into the castle. Schmendrick convinces King Haggard to take him on as his magician, and in this form, the unicorn still has some power, and she is able to thwart the current magician of the court when he tries to use magic to reveal to Haggard that she's a unicorn. And he kind of lets it go and leaves, which it was all very simple. Like, it was like 2 pages. It was very short. And I was like, why can we not have actual conflict in the story? But the king's son, his adopted son, the prince, is smitten. He is head over heels in love with Our Lady Amalthea. He would break the world for her. So he's trying to seduce her and convince her to be with him by bringing her heads of dragons and doing all these things for her. And he keeps asking Molly, who has now been turned into a servant for King Haggard, and her only scenes are now giving advice to the prince and feeding old men. That's like her only scenes at this point. So she's just there. That's why I said she's just there. And there could have been things done with her character because she was, for some reason, the only woman with this band of thieves. Now she's the only woman in this group. And it's just like, we needed someone to cook and clean for us. So that's why we made her a woman. And that's why I said it's done dirty by its time that it was written in. So Molly talks to Amalthea, and she's like, it would just be so much better if you just loved him, because then you could just marry him and be a princess. Oh, I forgot. Molly does make friends with a cat who's able to tell her some stuff. So I guess she has like the benefit of this cat telling her things. And the cat is interesting, but the cat is described as a calico, but it's a male, and calicos are never male, but that's fine. Well, they're very, very rarely male, because to make a calico, the color is actually attached to the X chromosomes, and you have to have 2 X chromosomes for the calico pattern to come out. They can occasionally be male, but it's incredibly rare. But his fur is described once as random, and it's not random. Like, his fur is not random. The color is random. So basically, Molly tries to convince Amalthea that she should just go for the prince because her life would be like perfect and magical, and she wouldn't have to worry about the Red Bull and all these things. And then she has these nightmares all the time, and she's starting to lose her like sense of who she is and where she belongs and what has actually happened to her and how she even got here. And she doesn't know anything. She becomes Born Sexy Yesterday. And I hate that trope so much, but that's very much what she becomes. She is now referred to as this, like, as a young woman instead of a young girl. We haven't been here that long, so I really don't know what's happening there. If he just decided it would be better if she was like aged up. And she's very much like, she doesn't understand who she is. She doesn't have any memories. She's like struggling to kind of like be a human. And so that's why it's the Born Sexy Yesterday trope. And Lear is still like head over heels with her. And she starts like crying and explaining this nightmare to him, as he like begs her to tell him of her nightmares. And so she tells him, and then he starts, like, they're having a conversation. Haggard gets mad, so they like run up around a corner, and he starts singing to her because she asks to be sung to or something. He starts singing to her, and that's when she like falls in love with him, and Haggard gets super pissed about it, and that like kind of gives us this reveal that Haggard knows that she's a unicorn, but he's waiting for her to like reveal it to him, because if she just stays trapped like this, then he still succeeds. And then she keeps staring out at the ocean at this point too, so I'm like, there's something about the ocean. I probably have little memories of the movie too, but I'm like, there's something about the ocean, clearly. So the bull has run all the unicorns into the ocean, and they are caught in the froth of the sea, and that's where Haggard has trapped them. I don't know why, still, because apparently unicorn parts bring a hefty price in this world, so why he would just run them into the sea when he could clearly use the money, I still don't understand his motivation for that. So they're trapped in the sea, and they have to kill the Red Bull to get them out. And the cat kind of explains that to Molly a little bit, not necessarily the sea, but she says that like, or he tells her that like the unicorns have been like trapped by the bull and all this stuff. So I'm struggling to talk about this because I'm so frustrated about certain aspects of it. Mainly the Born Sexy Yesterday trope really, really pissed me off, like a lot. So the unicorn then starts falling for Prince Lear. And at that point, she loses completely who she was. She is now just a vessel for Prince Lear's love. And she basically says that at one point when Molly asks her something about who she is. She's like, I'm Lady Amalthea, beloved by Prince Lear. Like, that's who she is. She has taken on this role, and that's all that matters to her now. And I'm very frustrated. Eventually, Molly figures out where the bull is, and Schmendrick kind of follows, and the prince follows because Amalthea followed Molly, and Schmendrick eventually followed, and then they have this confrontation with the bull because it leads to where the bull is caged beneath the castle, but it's this magical entrance that they had to figure out the riddle to enter into. So they get onto this beach, and the bull chases down Amalthea, and Prince Lear basically jumps in front and gets killed protecting her. And that's when she comes back to herself and realizes, like, what is happening, and that because she was back in the unicorn form, but had no idea what the fuck was going on. And that's what comes back to herself and allows her to, like, have the, like, power to fight the bull, because before she cowered before it, and now she has the strength to do it because someone was willing to sacrifice themselves for her. So that's what triggers it. She needed someone to sacrifice themselves for her, or it was like, once again, the answer is love. I marked a page. Is this before she turns? Okay, so before she turns back, there's this whole argument with, like, her just staying in, like, human form, because it would be so much better, because once again, everyone is like, you could just stay in this form and just marry him and everything would be good. She brought Lear back to life after she got rid of the bull. The bull just, like, waded out into the ocean. Basically, she just confused the fuck out of him, and he, like, waded out into the ocean and drowned, and then all the unicorns came, like, running out. And she came back and, like, revived Lear. with her horn magic. Yes, my order of this is messed up. Let me go back. Let's see if I can get this right. Before they decide to go fight the bull, they basically decide if she's going to stay in human form or in unicorn form. And she turned to look at the magician at last, and even through the darkness, he could feel the terror in her eyes. No, she said. No, we are not strong enough. He will change me, and whatever happens after that, you and I will lose each other. I will not love you when I am a unicorn, and you will only love me because you cannot help it. I will be more beautiful than anything in the world and live forever. Schmendrick began to speak, but the sound of his voice made her cower like a candle flame. I will not have it. I will not have it so. She was looking back and forth from the prince to the magician, holding her voice together like the edges of a wound. She said, if there is left a single moment of love when he changes me, you will know it, for I will let the red bull drive me into the sea with the others. Then at least I will be near you. So this is why she does cower in front of the bull, and the prince, because of his love for her, jumps in between them and ends up getting killed by the bull. There's no need for that, Schmendrick spoke lightly, making himself laugh. I doubt I could turn you back if you wished. Nikos himself could never turn a human being into a unicorn. And you are truly human now. You can love and fear and forbid things to be what they are and overact. Let it end here, then. Let the quest end. Is the world any worse for losing the unicorns, and would it be any better if they were running free again? One good woman more in the world is worth every single unicorn gone. Let it end, marry the prince, and live happily ever after. And I was like, thank God she didn't listen. I was really annoyed that everyone in this book is telling her that constantly. Like, the passageway seemed to grow lighter, and Schmendrick imagined the Red Bull stealing towards them, grotesquely cautious, setting his hooves down as primly as a heron. The thin glimmer of Molly Grew's cheekbone went out as she turned her face away. Yes, the Lady Amalthea said, that is my wish. But at the same moment, Prince Lear said no. So he wouldn't let her give up herself, which is great. Prince Lear, honestly, best person in this book. Because he wouldn't let her sacrifice herself for him. He sacrificed himself for her, which, because he's a prince and that's what he's supposed to do. He's like supposed to be doing these quests and stuff. He brings it up that he's like, he's the hero. He's supposed to be doing these hero things. And that was his role in this tale. So they have this whole thing about how I am a hero. It is a trade, no more like weaving or brewing, and like them, it has its own tricks and knacks and small arts. So he's like, I'm a hero. This is what my job is supposed to be. So then they have this whole thing, right? And so then he brings her back, and he's like, or she brings him back after he dies, and he's completely torn apart over it, which is fair. And she leaves anyway, because that's what she does. So Schmendrick now has complete control of his magic because he's done the unthinkable and he's turned a unicorn back into a human. And therefore he's now like the most powerful magician. So he asks Lear to guide them out of the forest after all of this happens. And he's like, don't worry, someday you'll like find your own princess. And the book ends, of course, with a very disheveled woman running out of the woods begging for help from a prince. It's very much of its time. And I struggled with it a lot. And I hope I made some sense in this like review, because really my big issue is the unicorn had no agency in this. Because she never wanted to be turned human. She told Schmendrick it was an abomination, and then he did it anyway and told her, tough tits, deal with it. And then when she lost herself and only remembered being a human and was like, I will stay in this form, she was also then told no by everyone around her. Who, well, not everyone, but then she was told no again. Like, she was just consistently pulled back and forth over what she was supposed to do. Hardly ever had any of her own agency. She was very much reliant on the people around her to get things done for her, and that didn't result in any character growth for her. It didn't result in her being more understanding that because as a unicorn, she's very like haughty about things. She's like, oh, I don't need a human help. She never went, maybe we need, maybe human alliance should happen or anything like that. Never acknowledged any of that as once she like re-became the unicorn. But she also never like was like, oh, I can do things by myself. Like, she never got the ability to do things by herself, to have that confidence. And then she also never like changed in her like understanding of how humans interact and how maybe that should change the interaction between humans and unicorns. None of that happened. Schmendrick was Schmendrick. And I just, honestly, his character, he was he was the guy who consistently fails upward, and that pissed me off. He's like this mediocre guy, but because he's like tall and thin and puts on these airs, which the movie I think made him like short and squat, so I don't know, maybe there's some fat phobia in that, but he puts on these airs and people just accept that he like is what he is, or they find his like mistakes humorous because they believe he's doing it on purpose, and he just continuously like fails out of a situation, and like the failures save him consistently, and that doesn't really result in growth. Like if I think about him compared to, and this is a stretch because it's a very different era of fantasy, right? So if I compare him to fucking Balthazar from the Devils, who when he failed observed things, observed other like magic practitioners and went, oh my god, I could think about things differently, and had some growth. His growth only came because he realized the moments when he had been able to harness his magic and what he needed to feel in order to harness it, but it was an accident. And even at the end, it still seemed like an accident. He didn't actually like make it happen really, and then it was just there. And he also never acknowledged anybody helping him. There was no growth in any of these characters except for maybe Lear, but Lear seemed to revert into this like, he was like doing everything he could to get the attention of the unicorn. And then when he got her attention, he did keep doing things for her. But then like once that was gone, he suddenly was like, I can't do any of this. I don't want any of this. I don't want to lead a like country. And was like, okay, but you've known your whole life that you were the heir. So of course when King Haggard dies, you're going to be the heir. Like, and he goes from stopping and talking to the townsfolk and telling them how he's going to help them to like, I can't do that. That's impossible. Like, sir, get it together. Like there was no consistency in the characters. And part of it is I think it's just so short, but at the same time, like, where's the growth? Where was the point? Like, at least like, a lot of the older fantasy I've read has some sort of point that they're trying to make. And I couldn't really find the point in this. And that could very much just be me really struggling with the little bits and pieces of this that I did not like, making it very much harder for me to find things that I do like. Because I definitely am a person who, if there's a couple of viewpoints in a book that rub me the wrong way, I very much struggle with getting out of that. And the just inherent misogyny of the world, based on the time this was written in, really made it hard for me to get away from just having that bad taste in my mouth, which then soured everything else I read. It's like when you get how there's one little speck of mold on a piece of bread and the whole loaf just smells nasty. Have you ever accidentally bitten into a piece of bread where one piece in the back had a teeny tiny speck and you didn't see it? Happened to me a lot as a kid. And then you just can't get rid of that moldy bread taste for like the rest of the day. Even if you spit that bite out right away, it lingers. And that was very much, this lingered in a way that I wasn't really enjoying. And I feel bad because I can see elements of this that could make a really enjoyable story. And I'm sure the movie definitely picks up on that and does some other things. But you know what I would really like this as? A horror. I would love this as a horror, I think, because if we took all of those elements of things that I said I didn't like and we made it into a horror, this would be such a different book. So say you took this large creature that is controlled by an evil king who is just sitting in his castle. Honestly, he wasn't even out for gold or riches. I don't know what he was out for. So we needed to give him a motivation, okay? So say he's out for whatever power or longevity or the immortality that the unicorns can give him. And he's got this creature out rounding them up and killing everyone in its way. And then we have the one last one that's going to fight it, but she's accidentally turned human. And the fact that she can feel her body rotting around her. And we have a perspective from her of her losing herself and losing her memory and trying to figure out where she is and what she's doing, all while everyone is pulling on her every which direction. And we would have to maybe make like Schmendrick and Molly and Lear a little bit more like plotting and evil and trying to get her to their own things. But that could be a good horror from someone who reads a lot of horror. I think it could make a really good horror. But as a fantasy, I feel like it needed more. And I have not read a lot of fantasy from this time. So I'm not going to hold it up to other standards, but for my tastes, this just wasn't, it didn't live up to the expectations that I wanted. And I'm very upset about it because I really wanted to like it. So finished one from the TBR, one from my own shelves, but probably one that I may be selling this copy. I don't know. We'll see if I want to keep it. I'm glad I didn't highlight or write anything in it because I was not enjoying it. So it can go on to a home that will enjoy it because that was not me. So hopefully I'm able to put this together in a way that makes sense. And if you agree with anything or don't agree with anything, let me know. And if you like this video, give it a like. If you want to see more from me, hit the subscribe button. I will post another video later this week with a review about something else.